Just what I remember, Rhiannon and the trade union being rep from the trade union of my local Labour Party. But I just wanted to mention, I'm sorry, your name escapes me.
Radhika?
Hi. And that a colleague of mine, remember Laura, who's now left, now works in cultural industries in Manchester, but she did a great project along the lines that you've been describing, a sound project, people telling their food stories from Portsea, which is a little bit of Portsmouth. It's a really, really established part of Portsmouth. We both work there, so if it's okay, I'll put you in touch with her or her in touch with you. You might like to. She's still doing that sort of thing, but she's now in Manchester, so she's got a slightly different perspective. But anyway, that's what she's doing, and that's what she's always done. So she's a musicologist originally. But what I wanted to mention, I just reminded myself of a report that Campaign. I'm looking at my phone, just reminding myself. Compassion in World Farming produced a report not long ago called Damaged Livelihoods, which one or two of you might be interested in. And essentially it looks at factory farming, particularly highly invested factory farming, the rich farmers that you were talking about there, and how it so often damages livelihoods, threatens local residents, economies and farm workers, and it goes into pollution and economy and so on. It's a great report, and we're just drawing that to the panel's attention or anyone's attention. It's called Damaged Livelihoods, and it's a report from Compassion in World Farming. It's on the net. It's excellent. It speaks our language. Because actually, I mean, so much what you're saying, I was thinking about, it does drive down, amongst other things, animal welfare standards, doesn't it?
And Les has got his hand up.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the talks. I have two big questions whose answers I don't know. Discussion here and beyond. One relates to the condition of people in the agri-food chain, let's call it. People who are employed generally by large companies in the chain from after the farm gate, right? Food processing, packaging, retail, waste disposal, who are generally super exploited, often insecure contracts, many migrant laborers whose vulnerability is further exploited. And most of the monetary value of the whole food system lies there. Only a tiny fraction lies with the primary producers, whose income is constantly squeezed through competition among suppliers, even foreign suppliers. Even organic food is subject to global competition in this country, and so makes that production wonderful. So the question was posed by one or two speakers about how to improve the condition of people in those situations, employed generally as wage labor. What kind of political force within and beyond that sector would help to improve their conditions, and in many senses, wages, job security, and so on. Then the other big question is more about systemic change. And further to that context I set out, there are wonderful alternative initiatives all over the country, rural, urban, connecting rural with urban, using environmentally sustainable production methods, variously called agroecology, permaculture, so on. Some of them develop short food supply chains, bringing producers closer to consumers, that is, avoiding capitalist intermediaries so that the producers get more of the value added for their income, and the consumers pay less than they would in the supermarket chain for higher quality food, generally with only modest processing, if any. And these initiatives are largely invisible to most people, except for the few who engage with them and choose to buy food from their sources. So the big question might be put like this: how can those various alternatives be strengthened especially to strengthen the livelihoods that people can gain from them, as a basis to begin to replace the dominant system?
I think that's a really good question. I don't know whether you can do it without whether you can just build the alternatives, or whether you have to go ahead and run the supermarkets to give space to them. You're next, I think.
Yeah, it's yeah, my question kind of follows on from that a bit. I'm based in Manchester, and there are actually loads and loads of different projects in Manchester, all different sorts of things, from food banks to I always forget the name of it, Kindling Trust, who've actually bought a farm in Warrington, basically through bank, like community shareholding. Do you know what I mean? Like people, they've literally bought a farm, and the idea, their idea is that they want to improve the life of agricultural workers, the people who work on the farm, but also cut out the supermarkets. And I want to come back because I think the supermarkets are a really massive problem here. But I just want to pick up, because I really liked your choice of the word food activist. In a way, I think that's what we need to all become, is food activists. Because I think we need to link up these little projects. Like, I think you're right that a lot of people involved in the project know about the project. The people who maybe go and buy food from them know about the project, but everybody else doesn't really know about the project. But it's almost like linking them all up and all of us becoming food activists. And I think we have to take on, the supermarkets seem to be like the absolutely dominant factor in this, in not only in terms of controlling the food supply, controlling what the producers actually get paid, but actually they're really damaging to our health, because ultra-processed food, there was a report by the Lancet recently about ultra-processed food that connects ultra-processed food to 32 different health conditions. I mean, it's really bad for us. But of course, who pushes ultra-processed food is supermarkets, and they are, it's in your face all the time. But I think as trade unionists, you can end up being a bit, people shouldn't, making bad choices. You can get a bit moralistic, and that's not the way to go. It's not about being moralistic with people. It's about saying we need land. We need to take back land, we need to take back control over our own food consumption. But from a trade union point of view, we need time. Because why does everybody eat ultra-processed food? It's because they're knackered. They're knackered after the end of a long day, and you think, God damn it, I'll just go and have a Chinese because I'm tired, or whatever, on my way home. And it's like we need to connect all those things together. So I think from a trade union point of view, we should be demanding, we need more time. We need more money, time and money, in order to be able to eat better. And somehow we have to tackle the supermarket problem, because I do think it kind of connects.
Right, I think, Catherine, do you have your hand up? So then maybe after that, see if any of the speakers wants to comment on anything that's said so far.
Yeah, and I'll declare an interest. I'm based in Wales, so one of the reasons why I wanted to come here is how we articulate the demands and try and reach the rural poor, really, in terms of how we can cut across some of this, the people come into a lead who are more in tune with the Tories and big business than anything else. And I think, and it's a shame really, because we don't have huge agri-businesses in Wales, because we're so hilly and everything else. You can't really they're not enormous businesses. So lots of, even the well-off farmers aren't relatively well-off compared to the rest of the UK, probably anyway. And also, I think from a public sector viewpoint in Wales, Welsh Government is not brilliant at how they present themselves. We're in disputes with them because they're not paying public sector workers a decent living wage. Quite a lot of things they're doing, they don't necessarily talk to the people on the ground in terms of how you present things, like the 20-mile-per-hour thing has gone horribly wrong. But they also, what probably most people don't realise outside Wales, is they cut the bus services at the same time as introducing the 20 miles an hour, which was just a complete own goal, whereas it was a real opportunity to deal with the transport problems in Wales. So, I think there's a whole range of things, and I think probably we need to think about, what would we put forward as a class position, as a trade union movement, to challenge the politicians, but also to reach people in rural communities that do need a decent income. I mean, we do have minimum wage set for agricultural workers, we've still got that in Wales, but that doesn't really address the poverty levels, because we obviously want the minimum wage raised up to a living level anyway. And people can't afford to live, you can't afford to have your own home, and all those general things that happen across rural areas. So I think but I think linking that with the whole, suppose that the end-to-end food process is probably a good one, because then you bring in the trade unions who are in distribution, production, and obviously in the supermarkets as well, to try and actually what are the demands for the whole sector. I think is probably a good way of presenting that, because the people, the big multinationals that we're all fighting against are causing the problems for the rural poor, they're causing the problems for supermarket workers, they're causing problems for the companies that produce the food as well. So it is big business trying to make absolute profits. So I think there probably is some very good ways that we could probably link all these things together. But I think there is real potential, and I think a number of the trades councils in Wales have been looking at how can we try and intervene in a proper way to try and reach people that are perhaps getting caught up with this sort of anti-Labour government Tory propaganda. Not that the Labour government in Wales is doing a brilliant job in the first place. So it's trying to navigate your way through all of that. But I think the only people that can do it probably properly is the trade union movement in terms of driving that forward.
It's great, some really good contributions. And I'll carry on with those, but I just wondered if anyone here wanted to chip in about anything said, trade union organising or anything.
Just one, and I know I said it in my contribution, but I would really urge you to go onto the Food and Work Network website, because the reason that we put that together in the first place was exactly because we know there's like millions of different strategies, plans, campaigns, projects that are happening. Some might just be a little cul-de-sac in a quiet corner of a village town, but trying to get a picture of everything that's going on, collating it all in one place, so that then we can truly look at, right, what is the best way forward. Because the stuff in Tower Hamlets, I'd heard about the projects before this one around the photographs, and that was through the Food and Work Network. A report came out, the Land Workers Alliance, called Debt Migration and Exploitation, around the seasonal visas. We've done some stuff around food banks, and food banks that aren't diverse enough for the communities that they're supporting, and heard some harrowing stories around, people just not having the right food to be able to then go back and cook the families, because the heritage doesn't use tins of Heinz baked beans kind of thing, or even the own brands. And that's helping us then put together a strategy around what we do about supermarkets, because the simple answer is let's shut them all and build our own. But ultimately that's not the most straightforward answer, is it? But things like community gardens, community wealth building, community kitchens, even cooperative towns, which is another project down in London, which is like you can set up a food co-op with like 10 houses or 20 houses in your local street, and you all do roles and you put a fiver in a week, or what you decide as a cooperative what you're going to do, and you've all got jobs around that. That's so much better, isn't it, than just going to the supermarket, because it seems cheaper but actually it's harming us. So yeah, just like feed into it and utilise the reports and the blogs that are on there if you're doing any work. And one of the things that we had a really good session on was around people who are, time is a resource that we haven't got. You know, you've done a 12-hour shift in a food factory, you go home, the last thing you're going to think about is my meat, my veg, it's something quick and crap, or even a vending machine sandwich on your break, because that's all there is available. And we've been doing some work with the paediatricians, which is random. It started off as food workers and footwear, but actually now we're talking about are people getting access to food when they're at work? And the reality is, whether you're in NHS, whether you're in the prison service or the food sector, if you're on a night shift, there's nothing open. Well, that's wrong too, isn't it? So yeah, just to keep feeding into it, we need everything in one place. And it might be that you find that something else is better, but at the minute, that's an avenue that we've got.
Right.
Yes, I wanted to respond to a few things. So on your intervention regarding the, well, to enliven the slogan of saying that climate change is a class issue, I think I'm from France, and I've been looking at the farmers' protests in France, and what was very interesting there was the Confédération Paysanne's talks, so the equivalent perhaps of the Landworkers Alliance, that they refused to be put in the same bag as the large farmers, and they really denounced the large farmers as being part of the agro-industrial sector. And so if we're going to make class the core of the fight against climate change, then we need to discern where class interests are and what class alliance there can be, and not assume that, you know, for example, farmers are all one life. I mean, it's obvious saying it, but here in this country, I don't know whether this kind of organisation is taking place, and, you know, refusing to be, to be lumped into the same bag. And the second thing regarding the community initiatives, the internal problem, it seems to me, is that they lend themselves to gentrification processes. So it's good to become, all of us, food activists, but we also need to become housing justice activists, and, you know, like ask for regulations that go much beyond the food community initiative, and look at real estate markets and so on. So I think even just raising these questions as community actors is important, because otherwise we just work for bigger interests than us. And then finally, for the organisation of retail and supermarkets, unfortunately, I think the unions in that sector are very, very poor. They've been slashed consistently. And there's very interesting work done by a collective called the Angry Workers Collective, and they've tried to organise for years, going into, you know, the processing companies, trying to really be useful to people working there, but it's extremely hard work, and systematically the unions play the game of the direction and against them. So, but anyway, Angry Workers is a collective worth looking at, and they published a book.
Angry workers.
Angry.
Yes.
Do you have a question, David?
Yeah. Somebody might have said this already, because I can't hear that well. But we're talking about food, and we're at a climate conference, and I don't think anybody has said that if you compare the sort of healthy eating typical plate and the healthy for climate typical food plate, they're pretty similar. And that might be worth having more of a look at. I saw that in a book from McConaughey, the Centre for Alternative Technology. And I feel we're talking a little bit kind of not connecting and not perhaps having ideas to take forward. But I've got a question, which is, with some politicians, my local council for example, making pledges about free school meals, are there ways to join up our trade union campaigns and our community gardens with that? I mean, are the community gardens big enough to take that on, is one question.
I just wanted to come back on a couple of things that rise from a number of contributions, but actually motivated by Les' point. You see, Les is absolutely right. Most profit from agriculture and food production comes from what we call upstream or downstream production. It doesn't come from the farm. It comes from the corporations producing fertilisers and chemicals or fuel for the tractors, or the companies that take the food, sell it and distribute it and the rest of it. And that's why it's so important to look at what Sunak's doing, because what Sunak's doing is actually focusing on the least profitable and least interesting from an economic point of view, which is the actual growing of food. Because what he wants to do is to divert attention away from all those other things. Now, as trade unionists, that's interesting for us because it shows where power lies. And workers' power in agriculture and food doesn't lie on the farm, it lies in all those other sectors. And we have to, I think, if we want to talk about a future sustainable and just food system, we have to talk about where power lies and who's got the potential to fight it. If we had a strategy to unionise and organise which was focused on the farm, we'd lose. I mean, you know, the average farm has one worker on it, and the average farmer is aged 59 in Britain, which means if you think about it, 50% of farmers are over 59 in the UK. Actually, if you want to reach hundreds, if not thousands and tens of thousands, it's the people that Sarah works with. It's the people who build or distribute or drive or work in supermarkets, and they're the people who've got the power to change and transform it. Yet Sunak wants us to focus on the farmers because he doesn't actually want us to talk about poverty in those industries and in the countryside. And I think these, you know, we can build things quite easily. I mean, actually, you know, demands are really obvious. We want more council housing and social housing in the countryside to actually give people affordable housing. We want an end to second homes. We want an end to Airbnb. You know, actually, these are concrete demands which will make people's lives better and actually can start to win them to a vision of organising and things like, I think that rural internet matters whether or not people can live and work and have proper lives in the countryside. And the left and the trade union movement needs to do more of this.
I just wanted to say I'm involved in a food bank in Tottenham, and I'm also, through that, with other food bank volunteers, have set up our local branch of Right to Food campaign, which Sarah talked about very well. And the underlying thing about the right to food, like we're very happy to supply food in our communities. It's very, you know, it's a great place for talking about politics at the food bank. So we just wanted to, but we need to work politically. We don't want to be part of a volunteer infrastructure replacing what should be, you know, a proper system in this country. And we're aware that we're exploited to that extent. And so the Right to Food campaign about enshrining that right to food in legislation that no government can ignore is really important. And every now and again it comes up, I think, one of these everyday motions in Parliament. And you know, it doesn't get much publicity, but if that's one of the things as activists in the food sector we could do, because it would kind of cover a lot of the areas we've talked about already. Just you can just Google it, Right to Food campaign, and get up to speed on what's going on. But in London, for example, we've got activists in Southwark, in Newham, in Haringey, that's us, and in Hackney, and no doubt there are other places where people are having the same conversations. Like it's the government who are passing policies that are impoverishing people to a level that they have to go to food banks. It's the government that must start putting policies in place that don't have that consequence. And so it's really something we need to push to get that legislation passed.
Thanks. I'm going to be cheeky and bring myself in, because I was thinking we've talked a lot about the food growing in the food industry in this country, but which is a huge topic in itself, but haven't really so much touched on the global nature of it, and the fact that in this country, you know, the food has a massive land and water and labour footprint in other countries, and even when it's not obvious, for example, the importing of animal feed for livestock. I know Greenpeace, for example, have been campaigning about soya to feed chicken imported from Brazil, and then the deforestation is there, but it's very much hidden in these long chains. And in an area of possibly sort of common interest between climate campaigners, lefties, and your more conservative British farmers is these trade deals that have been brought in post-Brexit. the idea that, you know, I remember, I think it was Australia one was the trade deal was being done with, and the minister was seriously arguing that it was more environmentally sustainable to import lamb or whatever from halfway around the planet than here, and farmers like, how are we supposed to compete with this? So yeah, there's the complexity of the system in Britain, but it even goes even further than that.
I just want to say that every speaker on the panel has spoke well and eloquently, and I totally agree with every single thing that everyone said. But one thing that hasn't been touched on, I think, and as someone who works in the hospitality sector and the Unite Rep, and I see it a lot, is food waste. And it's the contributions it causes to landfill, and you know, methane, that's worse than carbon dioxide, and the poor source of quality of food as well. You can sort of see in places like where I work, and I'm just wondering what, as trade unions, we can do to properly organise and to campaign and you know, put pressure on many businesses, food producers, to mitigate this.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be great.
Can I add to the question?
Yeah.
Okay. A large proportion of food waste, perhaps even a majority, occurs within farms, before the farm gate. And of course, that means it's less visible than the waste that occurs after the farm gate. And that's because, again, it's part of the same power play by supermarket chains, contracting for more production than they realistically expect to sell, in the knowledge that they can, you know, simply reject some potential deliveries as whatever, on whatever pretext they invent, and then the consequences are suffered by the producer losing that potential income, and then having the burden of production, which is thereby waste, right? Maybe to be fed to animals at best, or worse, right? So the question should include all the waste generated within farms through no fault of the producer.
It keeps coming back to the supermarkets, and we need some kind of legislation to put them in line.
There was a campaign to put pressure, get politicians to put pressure on supermarket chains. Exactly how, it was unclear, because this doesn't correspond to anything in legislation, right? And I attended many events on food issues, and the speaker was always marginalized. Right? I mean, even if given a slot to speak, somehow the discussion was steered away from the supermarket chains as a primary culprit.
As with energy and fuel poverty, throughout this crisis, the major supermarkets have been making record profits. And so, in your example, Sarah, of the adding the 2p onto, or taking 2p off the payment to farmers for produce, that's while they're making record-breaking profits as well. So the challenge is really political, and it's really about getting our agricultural implements out from the shed and ramming them somewhere. You know, we have to fight that type of, that can't be legislated for, because the legislators are part and parcel of the problem. But it's stark, and the general public at large are probably not aware of it, because otherwise they wouldn't tolerate it.
Yeah. Does the time have a view on the use of pop-up meals, pop-up community meals, as a way of advertising this problem? I mean, it's a thing that we've talked about in our area in the past, about going back to the system of collecting food donations from here and there, food that hasn't been collected, and actually having community meals organised to advertise, first of all, to advertise the fact that a lot of families don't actually have enough food to eat. And also the fact that, as you say, food waste, where's food coming from? Are we doing things properly, which we obviously aren't? I mean, practical challenges of that, okay, we're going into, but yeah.
Certainly we've done this in our locality in the past, and embedded integrated campaigns, haven't we?
We have.
Consciousness raising and so on, and activism, yeah, but like all good things fizzled out.
Yes, we'd like to sort of fizzle it in again. If you
Yeah, we have a very bizarre local council. Whose colours I didn't mention.
That's a slogan then, fizzle it.
Yeah, as I was thinking that would be good. Yeah. It's interesting, of course, the sad thing is that inevitably the people who attend something like that are not necessarily the ones who are in most desperate need, because the ones who are in most desperate need are often too embarrassed or can't get organised in order to make use of it. But even as an advertising thing from time to time, we're working on this idea. You know, that's, I said, doing something.
You'd have to do that in coordination with your local refugee, street kitchens and things like that.
Or yes,
wouldn't you, to make sure that you're not impinging on
make
it.
sure hygiene,
Yeah.
sort of thing, yeah.
But not impinging also on their sources and their,
Surely,
their
we did have our own source at one
program.
stage where we used to take donations from a local organic vegetable producer, and we used to distribute just before
It was a
COVID.
vegetable scheme, but we stopped because they're not a charity and they were doing really badly, and you have to sometimes say, right, okay.
That's right.
You look after everybody, haven't you?
You have, yeah.
When we give evidence, the select committee was fairness in the food chain, and we were asked basically, do we think there's fairness in the food chain, and resoundingly everybody that was giving evidence the day I was there said pretty much no. But one of the things that we said was the Competition Markets and Authority investigation into grocery prices has suggested that some producers of branded food products have increased their profit margins even during double-digit inflation, which we've spoke about. And if the food sector won't agree to a voluntary scheme of food price caps like they have in France, then we've got to have a powerful regulator with the power to intervene on behalf of the consumer, a bit like you do when you go to Ofcom or those kind of regulators. And then so the suppliers and workers would then benefit from action to tackle pressure on supermarkets who are selling at excessively low prices. Such as, we gave an example of when there was a price war around sliced bread that led to loaves being sold for as little as 15 pence. Well, how's anybody in the supply chain making any money if that's how low that they're selling them on? But what we were saying is at that point the regulator would then, or should, introduce price floors as well to protect the sustainability